When you're designing games or game worlds, do you ever feel lost about who you're actually making the game for? Do you wonder who it is that will play your game? How it will appeal to various types of players that stumble upon it? Do you play Magic the Gathering? Are you a big fan of prescriptive personality tests? Alright, that should be a wide enough net to cast. Today we talk about the psychographics and how to attract them on Waytats. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Waytat. I am your host, and I will be your guide into the world of Magic the Gathering design extrapolated to gaming as a whole. Trust me, this isn't as scary as it might sound on the surface. Also, I would like to apologize for the lateness of this episode. The layoff at work went through on Thursday, and that has fucked up my entire schedule. So my brain just would not let me work. But before we get into the episode today, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're on the audio version, make sure you download and leave a review. It'll help me out a lot. Speaking of which, make sure to also follow my other content creator friends. Make sure to watch and follow Winkashika on Twitch and YouTube, and follow them on all their social medias. They'll be back streaming soonish. Also, make sure to follow and purchase from Mystic Luna on their Shopify page, listed below, to get wire wrap jewelry, gemstones, and trinkets. And of course, make sure to follow the ever lovely and amazing Captain Cupcakes in the link below. She makes awesome art and is planning on doing some cool projects in the future. But with that, let's get into the show. Alright, let's get into talking about the psychographics. Now, before we get into it, we gotta cover the ground rules of what these are and where I get them from. Psychographics are used by Mark Rosewater, a legendary designer of Magic the Gathering sets, to describe player types. Now, I first heard about these on Poorhammer, shout out to Poorhammer as much as they don't need it, and then later went back and read some of Mark Rosewater's articles on the subject. But the psychographics aren't just useful for 40k and Magic the Gathering. You can use them to help shape your design with the kinds of players you want to attract and to what parts of your game. Now, it should also be noted that the psychographics are not polar opposites of each other. You have all of them in you in some regard. Take me, for example. I'm a strong Johnny because I really love to use games to explore new ideas, concepts, and establish my signature for that game. Like when I played 40k, I tried to make orc suicide charges part of my thing. Didn't work, even though it was 6th edition, and that was a lot more viable back then. But I'm also a very strong Timmy. I don't really care about the minutia as long as I get to do my cool fucking thing. And I do have a spike part of my brain, as small as it is. I love to win, especially in games I feel like I found a cool thing in. But I'll forgive it if the win didn't feel like bullshit, and I still got to do the cool thing I like doing. But with that covered, let's jump into it. First is Timmy, also called Tammy. Look, when Mark Rosewater was making these names, it was still the era where it was assumed anyone in a nerd hobby was a dude. Not an excuse, but it was what it was at the time. Nowadays, we might call this the dinosaur kid. But these players are the ones in it for the pure fun of the game. They want big, crazy, cool things to happen. For them, the game is less about the game itself and more about having fun with other people. They don't care as much about the win-to-loss ratio as they do that everyone had fun, their opponents included. Anything flashy will get their attention, from big dinosaur monsters to endless hordes of zombies. But they really hate it when a game is very, very complex or has a single, small, narrow way to win and a bunch of ways to lose in an unsatisfying way. Also, not helped is when there isn't anything cool or wild. Like if you're designing a down-to-earth World War I war game where everyone looks vaguely the same, there's no easily done cracked strategies or vehicles, and if you choose the flamethrower instead of the heavy machine gun on one model in your group of 50 infantrymen, you'll inevitably and slowly lose the game. In that case, Timmy will fucking riot. So then, how do you design for Timmy? Well, it's actually surprisingly easy. You just need to think like a Timmy. Whenever they consider playing something, they think, do I like playing this? So your job, if you want to appeal to Timmys, is make something that has a lot of special secret sauce. Bigness. Which can describe a lot of things. Big pieces, cool art, badass poses, big footprints, big effects, things that take the attention. Timmys go apeshit for anything that not only has a big effect on the game, but looks great while doing it. And since they care a lot about fun and verisimilitude, they'll even like some weaknesses, as long as they're thematic, big, and cinematic. Like if you add a massive dragon to your game that's weak to characters using lances, but they also explode on death, Timmys will fucking love that. Even if it's only bad for them, because that's very cinematic of a brave knight sacrificing themselves to drive a lance into the dragon's heart just to die in a fiery explosion. But they also don't want things to be too deep in the weeds, since that's boring. So anything that requires deep mechanical introspection and consideration of perfect resource management and timing will turn them off. Instead, they'll generally love to use things that just slot in and do what they're supposed to do, and inform what else should be around it, often leaning back on flavor and the rule of cool to determine that. When given the choice to build their own deck, army, or pick a faction, they'll go for things that are a lot more linear building instead of web building, where you're picking things that make sense to go there rather than things that build on a specific strategy from a vague beginning. And again, they don't want to be the only ones having fun. The fun for Timmys is playing the game. So they love it when others pull off their cool shit, when things come down to a gamble and even like randomness to some degree. When it adds to the fun. So for the sake of example, what is a good design for a Timmy? Let's say this grand battle war game with heavy card elements lets Timmy play as a faction of undead monstrosities. They're both massive in size and can amass in titanic hordes. They have big spells with big effects, and their downside is that if their characters die, the whole thing crumbles. How things fit is obvious. The bone melders go with the skeleton abominations, while the ghouls go with the flesh carts. There's very little in this army designed as shutdowns, meaning everyone gets to do their cool thing, but everything here is tough and rotting, meaning Timmy still gets to be cool. Everything makes sense where it goes. But another faction in the same game is a nightmare. Timmy has to play a faction of 11th century human soldiers in a fantasy setting. They're small models and have realistically balanced army sizes. Their spells are subtle and hard to parse any actual effectiveness without experience in the game. Their downside is a resource management game you have to play during the game, where if you lose too many levies, then your farm system back home loses effectiveness, and thus your cavalry will face penalties that result in you losing victory points. You need to really examine everything to find its correct place, and some things don't even have one, and are designed to be built around or be used as fake outs to your opponents to make them think that your army is built around it. They require you to run interference on your opponent and be a rules lawyer all the time. You need to think a lot with this faction. Now, that second faction appeals to you, you are definitely not heavy Timmy. But if that first one appeals to you more, you're probably heavier Timmy. Next is Johnny or Jenny. And nowadays we probably call this one the artist if we're feeling particularly nice about it. These are the players that want to play not because they necessarily want to do the cool thing in the game. They want to make the cool thing. They want to show off their creativity and express themselves. Not necessarily wanting to win, but wanting to find something interesting, thematic, finding sick-ass combos and builds, or discovering something powerful. They love creativity and discovery over even the gameplay at times. And even better is if they can leave their mark on the game. Like if they're the reason something is on the ban list, they have a deck or an army list on a wiki that they created. They inspired a card or unit. Or hell, they show up in a Reddit story as, that time I got bent over a table and it's pretty fun actually. Even on the lower end, if they get the reputation of the Blood Angels player of their LGS, or the person that jumped into a D&D game and saved the party, they're happy if they get to experiment, play around, and have a shit ton of options. And hate it when everything is samey and there's not really any options and the wiggle room is very, very restrictive. But how they prefer their designs. Well, like Timmy, they really enjoy being inspired and want hype. But for them, it's not from big effects. It's getting to do something cool. Their first question when they look at a thing is, what can I do with this? Rather than if it's something that they instantly like. They don't generally consider its cost, more what its potential is. They love to look for things that are ignored and see if it has some potential, trying it out to see if they can be the ones to show that it does have an edge. They shy away from things that are easier, show them the trick. See, it's not fun when the game holds your hand and tells you that you're a clever girl, but it's fun when they let you try it for yourself. Also, sorry about that, but I'm not sorry. Now, generally, Johnnies will go for things that are a lot more modular to build, i.e., they don't want to be forced down a particular path and instead go for things that let them build like a web. Picking one thing and finding an element that matches their list building artistic vision. They're the Lego builders that go off script. They don't want the instruction book and will get pissy if you insist on making them use it. They also really love overlapping themes and combos, the more the better. Having mixed multiple synergies and broken combos is what they live for, even if it means jumping through hoops. Anything for the challenge of getting their brain fully engaged in the system. So, what's a good example? A role-playing game that lets Johnny play as the often maligned Alchemist class. This class's base concept is mixing reagents for specific effects mixed with skill rolls. When certain reagents are combined, they can go well and create something very powerful, or it can be combined into something awful. The rules behind it are complex but open-ended. The reagents have thematic connections to other ones, and nearly none of them require you to pick another one if you don't want to. The number of written down reagents is such that there's over 5 million combinations, and only a few hundred have ever been discovered. And how would we piss a Johnny off? This role-playing game makes Johnny play as the often maligned Warden class. This class's base concept is on the use of your affinities for massive defensive boons. However, there are only 6 affinity trees and no overlap. Most levels have only 1 or 2 affinity options, and the ones that don't have a prerequisite that locks you into a particular path. The class is solved, but its maximum power output is a known quantity, and Johnny very much dislikes and is annoyed with that. Any attempts to mix things up breaks the class, as multi-classing or multi-speccing the same class entirely destroys your progression tree. This is a nightmare for Johnny. Our next is Spike. Surprise, surprise, doesn't have a gender-neutral name, because Spike is gender-neutral. Now, Spikes are the ones that care about winning. They want those big win-loss ratios. For them, the thrill of the game is competition, getting one over on your opponent, seizing the day. They compete to win and will oftentimes do whatever it takes within the confines of the rules and competition to achieve it. Because while yes, winning is important to them, it's more glorious and meaningful when they do it within the rules and by their own hand. Meaning they'll meta chase, borrow strategies and lists from others, find the niche corner cases and live in them. Hell, they'll even rules lawyer and demand exact adherence to the rules. However, this doesn't make them a toxic player. While it's an easy assumption to make, Spikes aren't necessarily assholes. In fact, any psychographic can be. But Spikes don't really mind losing. Losing is okay. Losing makes sense sometimes. but they want to lose the right way. They want their opponent to whoop their ass or for it to be a close game. They hate mechanics that are random, unbalanced, or unfair because that robs them of claiming victory if they won and minimizes their effort if they lost, even on their opponent's behalf. And these guys are actually as easy to design for as Timmy is. See, since they're focused on the win and competing, the question they ask when building their elements together is, should I play this? Instead of if they like it or find it interesting. They want to do the smart choice. They want to know how things work. They want to open up the hood and see that all the components do what they're supposed to, and that helps them win. While it might sound like they're ignoring your cool art and lore, they're engaging with the game system you spent all that time and effort working on. And that leads them to value things that tend to be overlooked. Like if you have a card in your game that no one plays because it's a basic draw 2, discard 2, a spike can come along and see all the ways to play with that. It seems like you have to immediately discard, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that you have to draw more cards to discard. And even if it did, that's beneficial under the right circumstances. Spikes like to find the good pieces. They like to metagame and be rewarded for being very clever boys. They're hunting to be challenged and challenge other people. They want to really work for it. So give them what they want. Resource management, choices, options, multiple paths to victory, ways to react, play off their opponent, and let them set up their game plan. Let's give some examples. Your sci-fi themed trading card game has a wide variety of cards and win conditions. Cards are well designed and have a variety of use cases, with every card in the game having a potential place in every deck. It has a strong deck building and metagaming community that is friendly and loves sharing tricks and tips to the game. Very little is up to chance, and in order to play effectively, you need to manage your resources well and read your cards very carefully. But if you decide to punish spikes for enjoying the game how they want, your sci-fi themed trading card game has a relatively small number of competitive cards and only one real win condition: decking your opponent entirely. Most of the cards have a very narrow, obvious use case, and the ones that aren't are low-powered and don't offer much of anything. The entire community is hyperfixated on lore rather than gameplay and are very hostile towards metagaming. There's a lottery mechanic built into a good amount of the game, making it useless to try and manage resources intelligently. Spike will probably never play again. But now we move on to the aesthetic profiles. These are like the psychographics and are kind of lumped in with them, like I'm doing here, but have a very important difference. Rather than being based around how they like to play, it's what they find beautiful about a system. What gets them going in a gaming sense. What gets their jizz anyways. The two kinds of aesthetic profiles are Vorthos and Mel. Vorthos sees beauty in the flavor and storytelling. Vorthos loves concepts, cool themes, interesting art, and mechanics that serve the lore that all comes together to create a beautiful whole. They care more about how the mechanics work with the aesthetics to capture the concept rather than anything like balance or performance. Designing for them is easy in that way. If you make the lore mechanics line up, they'll love that shit. Meanwhile, Mel looks at the mechanics to find beauty. Mel loves to see the mechanics of a thing come together as a cohesive unit. All the little details that come together to inform a player where to go with that design. Mel's find beauty in well-executed mechanics. They don't care as much about power as they do about how compelling they are. So then, let's put all of these together. If you want to attract a well-rounded player base, you're going to want to make sure to include all of the following. Let players play cool things. Let players forge their own path. Let players go all out and min-max for the win. Give them stuff that itches the right aesthetic for the rules, and the right rules for its intended concept. It's really that easy. Now, if you want to lean one way or another, alter the amounts. If you want to have a more serious buttoned-up game, have less stuff Timmy's like. Things should be smaller and more reserved. Or if you don't want anyone playing to win, remove routes for a spike to show their dominance. If you'd rather everyone look at the lore, maybe make sure the aesthetics and rules are basically one-to-one. Or hey, maybe just focus on getting rid of the toxic players instead. But anyways, thank you so much for watching and listening. you have opinions, improvements, corrections, and anything else you want to talk about, comment below or email me at waytappods@gmail.com. That's WAYTATPODS@gmail.com. And remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. And follow my podcast feed for audio versions, and come back next time when we try to figure out how the fuck an alien would even work. Have a good night. Don't murder. Have fun. And remember, there's room for everyone at the table. Just build a bigger table. This has been Why You're Talking About This, and I've been your host, William. Good night.